Hey there, puppers! Welcome back to another Beyond the Book. Today we are going to be talking about Matilda. So I did see the movie first, and I just recently read the book as an adult. So shocker, I do like the movie a little bit better. But we're going to get into a little bit of each of them and how they're the same and how they're different. Starting off with the book. It is written by Roald Dahl. He's the same writer that wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which I did previously in a Beyond the Book with 2 movies and a book. For this one, I really enjoy his writing style. It's very simplistic and in a way organic. It feels like he's talking rather than writing, which is really, really nice to just kind of like breeze through a book. It also, again, has really fun illustrations all throughout the book so that you can kind of see what he was imagining these characters to look like, which is kind of helpful because I kept imagining what they would look like in the movie rather than how he actually describes them. So starting out is Matilda herself. So Matilda is very, very small. She's like significantly smaller than everyone else in her family. She's only, I think, like 4.5 or 5, which is different than the film.
6.5.
You're 4.
6.5.
Also, it is very English, the book. And what I mean by that is everyone still has that sense of like prim and proper, and just like, oh gosh, like, just the very like British type personalities of what Americans think British people are like. And also Matilda's kind of an asshole. In the book, she just kind of jokes with her family because she feels like it, because they're mean and she thinks that they deserve it. Rather than there being some sort of comment or quote that leads her to believe that she is punishing them for them doing something wrong. She is very much a wormwood. She behaves just like them, but instead of being mean to her, she's just being mean to them in response. She is very, very smart still. She is, still goes to the library, still talks to the librarian. She does have a lot more pranks in the book than in the film. She borrows a parrot and she puts the parrot in the chimney and then talks to her dad through the parrot, and he thinks the house is haunted and he freaks out. But kind of weird little things like that happen throughout the whole book. One thing that I was waiting for the whole time in the book was any note or comment about her powers. We got almost 3/4 of the way through the book. The book was almost finished before her powers came into the picture. Whereas in the film, we do see them a little bit earlier, her showing signs of her telekinetic powers. Also, the biggest thing I feel like I didn't like about the book compared to the film is the relationship between Matilda and Miss Honey. In the book, it comes up with this very clear idea that Miss Honey is simply extremely excited that she has an intelligent child in her class. So you don't necessarily get the feeling of love between the two of them, like she loves Matilda. You just get the idea of like, wow, this is a really bright student. I'm a teacher. Like, I want to nourish and help grow this intelligence, not necessarily like, I love Matilda and I want her to do well. Also, the relationship that I actually like better in the book than in the movie is the relationship between Miss Honey and Miss Trunchbull. So the Trunchbull in the book is still Miss Honey's aunt. However, she is mean. Like, if you thought she was mean in the movie, like, she is real mean in the book. In the book, she essentially, when she raises Miss Honey and Miss Honey decides, like, okay, I want to live on my own, like, I'm moving out, I already found a house, like, sayonara. The Trunchbull is basically like, well, wait now, you have to pay me back for all the stuff that I bought you. Like, I fed you for your entire life, I clothed you for your entire life, I want all that money back. And she basically takes Miss Honey's paychecks. She takes all of the money Miss Honey makes and leaves her £1 a week in spending money. So Miss Honey is like dirt poor. When Matilda goes over to her cottage, like, the cottage isn't this cute fairy tale cottage that we get in the movie with honeysuckles and the flowers and, like, where it's quite quaint and fairy tale like. In the book, like, she lives in basically a hut. It is described as a cottage, but, like, it has no running water. It has very little electric. She has to use, like, a propane gas heater stove for everything. And her £1 a week allotment helps pay her rent and also only buys her a loaf of bread and margarine. So that's what she eats. It's just bread and margarine. And then she says she gets her one sustainable meal a day at school. So she is very, 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 very poor in the book. She still suffers even after moving away from the Trunchbull. The Trunchbull is still basically just really digging her hooks into Miss Honey in the book, which I think was a more interesting dynamic than just like, oh, I got away from you. Also in the book, Matilda, once she does get her powers, I think the total number of pages is something like 264, like 200, hang on, I'll look at it, 240 pages, and Matilda doesn't get her powers until like 173. So that's kind of like how many pages she has these powers for. And it's definitely described in a way that you almost feel bad for Matilda for having these powers. Like, she says that it's like an intense pressure in her head, and like she feels her eyeballs heating up, and like there's nowhere for all this pressure to go until she feels like arms and hands like reaching out of her eyes, which to me it sounds extremely disturbing. Like, if I felt like hands were coming out of my eyeballs, I'd probably be pretty freaked out about it. But the first time that Matilda uses her powers in the book is when she tips over the glass of water that has the newt in it. Now the newt is another side story. The Trunchbull is terrifying in this book. She's very mean. She is physically abusive. Like, we see that in the film a few times of her, like, physically abusing children. But in the book, it is way worse. Like, she picks students up by their ears and, like, waits until their ears grow longer before she'll put them down. Just really, really weird and terrible things that she does to these kids in the book. However, the children in the book are also more likely to prank her as well. So in the book, Lavender actually hunts for the newt. She goes to the stream and she purposefully tries to find the newt to put in the glass of water. Like, this is a planned event that she has, whereas in the film, Lavender they find the newt on their way to school, and then she has it when the Trunchbull comes in and she panics and doesn't know where to put it, so she puts it in the pot of water. So it's more of like a rush, an accidental affair in the movie, whereas in the book, it is planned. Anything bad that happens to the Trunchbull in the book is planned by the students to try and get her goat, basically, because they hate her. And the teachers don't try to stop these students because they also hate the Trunchbull, because of how mean she is and how cruel she is to the students and the teachers alike, calling them bad teachers and, you know, just really making life terrible for everyone. Finally, the last thing that is very, very different in the book than in the movie is Matilda's family. So her family isn't much mentioned. After Matilda goes to school, they're hardly mentioned at all. There's no more like pranks on her father and mom. There's like no real home life after she starts attending school. It's all happening in school or between her and Miss Honey. Like, there's not much home after that. And also, her parents weren't necessarily cruel or abusive to her in the book. They were mainly just like, you're small and you don't know. Like, you don't know better.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Almost like standard parents. Standard parents when their kids think that they know everything and they're like, you're just a kid, you don't know any better. But I wouldn't necessarily say that they were abusive or mean to her. By the end, they did get a little bit worse, especially when Harry Wormwood gets caught for selling stolen car parts. In the book, it was actually stolen cars. Like, he bought and resold stolen cars as a whole, not just the parts. So whenever they get caught, Matilda is actually at home. She's at home and her parents are like, get your shit, we're getting out. Like, we're moving to Spain, say goodbye to everyone, like, we're leaving now. And Matilda is like, no, I don't want to go. So she runs to Miss Honey and tells Miss Honey that her parents are leaving. And Miss Honey is basically like, well, they're your parents, you have to go with them. It caught me off guard because this woman is supposed to love Matilda. And she's like, well, there's nothing I can do, you have to go. And they finally, like, Matilda's like, no, tell them that I can stay with you. And she, like, runs back to her house, where basically she's like, tell Miss Honey I can stay here with her. Like, she just needs to hear you say it. And it was just a really awkward situation because there was nothing formal. It was basically Miss Honey being like, if they tell me I can keep you, I will keep you. But if not, you have to go. There was no adoption forms. They were just like, all right, deuces, like, and then they left. But the one character that was given way more character in the movie than in the book was Matilda's brother. In the book, he's not involved much at all. Like, there's the one scene where he's trying to add up all of the numbers with the car, and Matilda gets the answer first. Like, that's the one scene that he's really included in it all. And it almost makes you feel bad because at the end of the book, Miss Honey is holding Matilda in her arms and, like, her parents are driving away, and then her brother, like, waves out of the back window at her. And you almost feel bad, like, oh man, like, this kid has to stay with his shitty parents, like, but he wasn't a bad kid at all. Whereas in the movie, they make him kind of like a mean older brother, so you don't quite feel as bad when he leaves with the parents. But
have a marshmallow. Have another marshmallow, dip face.
Overall, the book was really enjoyable to read. I think that if you read the book first and then watched the movie, I think that you would still really enjoy both of them. However, if you're in my position where you watch the movie first and then read the book, I think you're still going to like the movie a little bit better. So I'm going to go over some reasons why I like the movie better. So one of the biggest differences, of course, with the movie and the book, they are an English family. They are British. They live in England. They are a different culture than myself. In the movie, this is an American family. So of course there are always going to be cultural differences between any type of difference in location. So whether it's similar like England and the USA, there are still minor differences that kind of make it more nostalgic in a way. So in the movie, the family is definitely more aggressive. They kind of like lock Matilda in her room. They won't give her food. Like, she has to cook for herself. They leave her alone all day. Like, it's more American in how the husband and wife behave with one another. So in the book, like, Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood will watch TV, but they're watching like soap operas. In the movie, they're watching wrestling, and Mrs. Wormwood is extremely into the wrestling match. I don't watch wrestling, so I don't know what it's technically called. But it's a lot more relatable for me because I grew up in an American household with an American family where certain things are done and said that would be considered inappropriate or not, I don't want to say correct, but not correct for someone who's like English. They would think like, oh my gosh, like that's absurd. I can't believe you talk about that. So it was more relatable to see the family dynamic in the movie. And also it was so much more fun to actually see it. And I love Danny DeVito, so to see him playing the dad in this movie was just a real treat. I think that he did really well with having kind of like a Napoleon complex of like, I'm big, you're small, and meanwhile he himself is very small.
What?
So it was just really cool to see the dynamic. I think he pulled off the used car salesman really well. And I think that the chemistry that all of the actors have together, it makes it feel much warmer. And that's the only way that I can really describe it. So like immediately Matilda and Miss Honey just hit it off. Like you can feel the chemistry between them. Like Miss Honey's so intrigued that she has this bright little girl in her class. But you can also tell she cares about her, like when she goes to talk about her family and then she leaves a book behind, like, we'll talk later, it's okay. And just like the gentleness that she has and the protective nature as well. So in the book, Miss Honey, when her students are being mistreated by the Trunchbull, she just sits in the back and she's like, oh dear, like that, you shouldn't do that, you're hurting him. Whereas in the movie, she actually does stand up to the Trunchbull. So whether it's going and taking Matilda out of the chokey when the Trunchbull's like, wow, like, okay, you have like some gall to do that. Or just generally telling the Trunchbull, like, you're not going to push me around. So I think that Miss Honey has more of a personality in the movie than she did in the books, and she shows that she actually cares and loves her students. And I also really like in the movie that she eventually becomes the principal, whereas in the book she doesn't. A different teacher becomes head teacher when the Trunchbull leaves. Other than that, story-wise, I would say it's pretty similar. With the exception, Matilda does get her powers a little bit sooner. So like when she's watching TV and she explodes the TV. So she starts showing signs of powers a lot sooner than in the book. And also she keeps her powers. So in the movie, at the very end when she's living with Miss Honey, you see her like, oh, well, you know, and she never used her powers again, except, and she like calls the book and the book flies over her. Now in the actual book, once she scares the Trunchbull so much into leaving, her powers go away. So she doesn't have powers anymore. And the explanation was Miss Honey saying, like, I think you being in a kindergarten class, you had so much power inside your brain and so many things, and you were basically bored and all that energy had to get out somehow. And it came out in the form of telekinetic powers. But now she's in, like, grade 11 by the end of the book as a 5-year-old in grade 11 because she's super smart and she is using all of that brain power more to learn, and so she loses her powers. I would say, in my humble opinion, that even though the book and the movie are very different, they hold the same tone, they hold the same vibe. I think that the movie did so well in capturing all the little nuances of the book. So from Matilda being small but very, very smart, coming from a poor home life despite cultural differences between English and American, and just capturing the characters. And I really love how you can just tell the chemistry and the charisma between the characters in the film, I think captures what Roald Dahl was trying to do in the book. I also absolutely love that, again, I might be wrong in the actual title, but I believe one of the producers was Lissy Dahl. I believe it's pronounced Lissy, which I thought was really cute because that's the name of Miss Honey's doll in the book and in the film. But that was actually Roald Dahl's wife. So I think that's why it's captured so beautifully in the film, is because Roald Dahl, the writer, his wife was actually involved in the making and the process of the film. So despite all of the differences, I think both of them have that same feeling that's captured whenever you read or watch. So I don't necessarily think there's one that I would recommend over the other. It's nowhere near like Howl's Moving Castle or anything like that. It's honestly very close to the 1970s version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, compared to the writing, where there's a lot of differences, but it captures that same feeling. For me personally, I still like the movie way better. I think that's just because of rose-colored glasses and the nostalgic aspect of it. Again, if you watched this movie growing up and you didn't try to move things with your mind, you're lying. So I think that this was just one of my favorite films as a kid. It gave me started my love of books and reading, but it also gave me kind of that sense of magic and fantasy from a young age. And I think that the book is very, very, very close second. But just some of those minor cultural differences between the families and such, I think that's why the film wins out. But I would really like to hear your opinions. If you've read the book and watched the movie, which one is your favorite? Which one did you read or see first? And also, what should I read next? I'm on a roll with these kids' books, and I really, really love reading them, especially because I didn't read them as a child, and I've seen the movies first. So I'd really like your opinions on some things that have been converted into movies or TV shows that have been children's books that were your favorites growing up. So let me know in the comments down below, and I can't wait to see you guys again with the next one. Toodles!